Awesome. Welcome, everyone. It's so lovely that you're joining us. I wanted to just welcome you all to Poolside PD. The session was Center for Digital Thriving. Whether you're joining in from, your backyard, your desk, actually poolside. We are just really glad that you're here today with us. I'm Chrystal Koech, CDT Fellow, and I'll be your moderator for today. And we have a really exciting 20 minutes prep for you. So we have a lesson preview. We also will be doing a live Q&A. So really, you could please put your questions in the chat. We can just, take them and we'll dive in towards the end. And then we also have a special giveaway and promo code for everyone who's joining us live. With that said, Emily, want to kick us off with an intro?
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Weinstein. I am a developmental psychologist and a researcher focused on youth voices about tech. I'm also one of the co-founders of the Center for Digital Thriving. I've spent the last 2 decades just completely fascinated by what teens have to say about the hidden challenges of growing up with new technologies like social media and now generative AI. We do a lot of work that's focused on translational science, really thinking about what adults and educators can do to help based on the things that we hear from teens that are hard. And I've done a lot of this work for many years in close partnership with Carrie. And I will say both of us are also living plenty of these tech questions at home. And I have two young kids, so I have plenty of my own tech decision points in my household too.
Thanks, Sam. And I'm Carrie James. I'm a sociologist by training, and I'm a longtime researcher at Harvard Graduate School of Education at Project Zero. In addition to being the co-founder of Center for Digital Thriving, I'm the co-director of Project Zero. It's a research center that I know many educators, but maybe not all are familiar with. So with Emily, I've been a big advocate for youth-centered research, especially around technology. I'm also a mom of two teens. So if we cling to the pool metaphor, I'm often swimming in youth voices, both at work and at home. The youth voices can be a little bit different at home. I also share with Emily the belief in taking a critically optimistic stance about evolving technology. We're all aware of, and we want to be attuned to the critical challenges associated with technology, but also we want to be solutions focused, future thinking, and optimistic that we can all, and young people can thrive in a world with technologies. So that's a little bit about our stances. Chrystal introduced the session. I want to say a little bit about what we're going to do today. So recently we launched an online course for educators around 8 Mindshifts for teaching digital well-being. And the reason why we did this is because one of the reasons why we did this is because Mindshifts have been crucial for us as we've done our research and our resource design work. Today, we're going to focus on one of our favorite mind shifts, and that's from ref to coach. As teachers and parents, we know that it's really easy to fall into referee mode when it comes to technology, and there are definitely referee moments. But we hear from young people that they often need us to be coaches. So we're going to dive deeper into this mind shift and kind of what it has meant in our work and some of the resources that feature this way of thinking.
Beautiful. So first question, where did this idea of ref to coach come from?
I love that question. So several years ago, Emily and I were writing our book, which is called Behind Their Screens: What Teens Are Facing and Adults Are Missing. And so we were always probing to hear from young people about their experiences, things that adults don't understand. And one thing that we heard from young people is this sort of perennial tension with the adults in their lives. They would hear from parents in particular, but also from teachers, they would hear comments like, "Oh my goodness, you're so addicted to your phone," and "Why can't you just get off your phone?" and "How much time did you waste on your screen today?" And these comments from young people really reflected certain assumptions about what teens were doing on their devices. Those assumptions reflected worries and good intentions, but those assumptions were often paired with and kind of justified things that we would refer to as referee moves, really sort of pulling the device away, pulling the phone away and other devices, pulling back from social media, because that was a way to solve some of the things adults assumed were happening. What we heard from teens, though, is that adults were often getting it wrong in terms of what was happening behind their screens, really misunderstanding or missing altogether some of the legitimate needs, some of the positives, and some of the really complicated pain points that young people were sitting with. So I actually want to turn it to Emily now. Emily, we have so many examples of the things that adults miss. We filled a book with them, but maybe what's one that you recall that really stopped us in our tracks in our research?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of us have read and heard a lot in recent years about an adolescent mental health crisis and troubling rates of anxiety and depression. There's so much we could say in that realm, but in the spirit of this question, I think one thing that we saw in our research is that there is a kind of hidden toll of these mental health trends. So more adolescents struggling with anxiety and depression also means that even those who aren't personally struggling often have friends or peers who are. So you can imagine you're a teen and you see a peer post something that seems like it might be a cry for help, but you're not really sure, or you're not really close with them. So you don't know if you're supposed to be the one who does something or says something. Or maybe you're a friend who just needs help and they're texting you late at night for support, but you have a math test and a basketball game tomorrow. So suddenly your desire to be a good friend gets pitted directly against your desire to put down your phone or take care of yourself. And then you just have adults yelling at you that you have terrible phone habits or that you should get off your screen. So this is just one example, but a real dilemma that isn't just about tech habits, but something that's tricky at any age and especially tricky, a big burden on young shoulders. I also think I chose this example because it's just one of many, but it's a great example of an area where the coaching mindset is such a powerful unlock for us as adults um, because while limits and boundaries around tech are super important and needed, if they are the only thing that we're talking about or the only thing that we're seeing as our role, like around regulating them and sort of blowing the whistle when teens are over screen time, we can really miss the opportunities to listen to what's hard and then to coach in ways that help teens through the things that are hard and support them in developing and building the kinds of skills and dispositions that they actually need in a really complicated world that has a lot of tech in it.
Beautifully said. And I really appreciate that underscoring of that coaching mindset and really kind of introducing a paradigm shift, I think, for a lot of folks. So, next question, with so many schools implementing new tech policies, phone bans this year, do you think that will lessen the pressure on educators to play referee?
Yeah, I think that it actually may well lessen this pressure. And that, of course, can be a good thing because teachers can kind of move from monitoring the classroom for who's got their devices out to really focusing on the learning. And at CDT, we are big believers in clear, very intentional boundaries around technology use so that you can focus on what's important in front of you. But what we hope that phone bans don't do is kind of create the belief that tech-related puzzles are solved now because the devices aren't allowed in the school. A few months ago, an educator emailed me to share a quote that I wanted to share. She said to me, "This school year, cell phones were banned from classrooms in the two districts I've been working in. It has changed many of the struggles teachers were facing in the classroom, but the issues teens are facing on screens remain the same." So, in other words, what she was sharing is that some of the challenges that we heard about in our research are still present for young people when they pick up their phones from the Yonder pouches at the end of the day or pull them out of their lockers and turn them back on. Educators also tell us, and maybe some of you are familiar with this, that what happens online out of school is still spilling over into the school day, and it's affecting classroom dynamics. Think about, the lingering emotional fallout from something a student saw on Snapchat the night before, and it's playing out in tensions between students in the classroom. So some of it is really present. So we appreciate that bans have their time and place and they can feel really straightforward and actionable. But we also know that teens tell us they need so much more. They need coaching to build resilience around some of those social emotional challenges that come with, seeing that you've been left out on Instagram or Snapchat, but also digital skills and judgment and intentional digital habits that will serve them outside of school.
And that's an extension to that. So, we have, even with boundaries in place, tech is still present, right? We're still living digital lives. Our teens, students are still living very full digital lives. What can educators do to help teens build those skills for digital life?
Yeah. So one of my favorite things that we get to do at the Center for Digital Thriving is we get to listen to teens and hear about the things that they're struggling with. And then we translate some of their concerns and we actually work alongside young people to build resources that address some of the things that they're authentically dealing with. And so a big part of our work is designing resources specifically for educators. One of my favorite resource, or two of my favorite resources, one is Tech and Values, which really intentionally creates space for students to think about what do I care about right now? And then turn to how is the way that I use technology helping me live some of those values. So that's a very powerful one. And I think that our Tech and Values resource will be shared in the chat. But the other one is our Tech Habits Challenge, which supports this very thoughtful moment of reflection on tech habits. Emily, why don't you bring us into that?
Okay. Well, I think I'll just start by saying that most of us, I'm guessing everyone in this room can probably think of a tech habit that they would like to change for themselves. This is not something that's super challenging to think about, but one of the things that we know and that we've heard a lot from teens is that the design features of technology, which we talk about, many of us I think talk and hear about a lot, the persuasive design, the ways that apps are capturing, holding, reclaiming, and hacking our attention, that's really hard for all of us to manage, and especially so for adolescents because the pulls to the screen are there are many and they are complicated. They're design features, they are social pulls. Their curiosities about other things that are going on. They are logistical challenges of navigating and negotiating updates about sports and what they're supposed to wear to their for Team Spirit tomorrow and their job schedule and their, picking up their younger sibling or whatever it is. So there are many pulls to the screen. As we started working alongside teens to try and understand how we might talk about tech habits in a way that was not just about screen time and was not just about adults handing down rules, but really about inviting teens in, we ended up with a sort of two-part resource. And it's particularly designed with high school students in mind, but it can be and has been adapted for students in different grades, especially for middle school and even later elementary school. But the way that we've designed it, it starts with a peer-to-peer interview. And so students actually start with these two by interviewing a peer and opening with these two powerful questions, which are, what are the best parts about the ways that you use tech right now? And are there any tech habits that you wish you could change? And then the interview flow actually builds on some principles from motivational interviewing, and it creates an opportunity to think about actually designing a personal tech habit challenge for yourself. And what's really key is you choose what tech habit you want to think about changing, but then the actual prompts walk you through some really intentional scaffolding to try and be more successful in developing a very specific challenge and being able to actually make a plan that can help you get there. So, for example, you may know that if you want to change a current habit, one strategy is to combat what can be very automatic by adding friction to what you would currently do or reducing friction from what you want to do. So if you wanted to stop scrolling your phone in bed first thing in the morning, you might decide, okay, I'm going to charge my phone across the room so that it's not just right in arm's reach when I wake up. And that step that adds some friction into the normal kind of impulse to just grab the phone and start scrolling. So you walk through actually some prompts like that. And I think there's so much that we could say here. I hope people will explore the resources. But I think one thing to really emphasize is that this decision of having students actually choose for themselves what tech habit they want to shift has been so revealing for us as we've watched different classes and different students take this on, because often I think they choose things that they feel like are really relevant to their well-being that we would have had no idea about, whether it's like, I really need to stop monitoring where my friend or boyfriend is on Snap Map because it's really bad for my mental health. Or there's this like one account that I'm following that or this type of account that I'm following that I wish I wasn't, or I want to stop posting in a certain way. And then we get to actually think through the process of scaffolding what it looks like to help develop that. Kara, before I hand back to you, I just realized I should have said at the outset that we co-created that resource with input from teens and educators and clinical psychologists and alongside our colleagues at Common Sense Education. So it's a resource that had a lot of different sort of touch points and interdisciplinary perspectives informing where we wound up.
So I want to encourage everyone to check out that resource and spend some time. It's very, very rich. I want to jump a little bit ahead to our next question that I'll just frame as the intelligent elephant in the room. So we've talked about phone bans. We've talked about phones in classrooms, but what about the intelligent elephant in the room, AI?
Yeah, so we've been doing a lot of listening over the last few months to students and also to educators, and I think it makes us feel like a coaching mindset is needed and often missing in how we're tending to talk about AI right now. In our team's teen advisory sessions this past spring, we have an advisory group at through In Tandem that we work with, and we heard from students about pressures they're feeling in some cases to use AI in secret because their peers are using these tools and they feel like they're going to fall behind if they're the only one who's not using it. We heard about them using tools not, cheating is part of the landscape for sure, but also ways that they're using these tools really as learning tools, trying to get tutoring or support on things that are hard for them. And yet many of them seem to just have this void in adult guidance because what they're hearing from adults is just don't do it at all. And yet they're seeing ways that their peers are using these tools. They're feeling tempted and curious to try. They're seeing the value of using them. And the kind of gap there is that we've taken this referee stance that has created a real void, I think, for many of them in getting some support and guidance, and frankly, like the discernment that I think we all need as we try and make sense of the output um, of a different bot conversation.
Yeah, I'll just add to that I think that we know and we're hearing directly from educators who we're interviewing and working with that they recognize there are so many positive affordances of generative AI. They're using them themselves for thought partnership and all kinds of tasks. And students want and need really intentional coaching around what LLMs, what bots can do for them, how they work, what they're capable of, what their limitations are, how to use them in ways that don't displace the most important parts of thinking and learning that we don't want to outsource to another human or another entity, another piece of technology. We have a wonderful colleague working with us, Dan B. Kim, who talks about slow thinking as a necessary precursor to any uses of AI. So it's really bringing that intentionality in. And that's one principle. That's a nice takeaway to coach students around. So slowing down and thinking about, what is my goal or my purpose here? And what is it that I might expect or gain from turning to ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude for some support on this question?
And before I go to my next question, I want to just do a quick plug for folks in the audience. If you do have a question, feel free to drop that in the chat. We do have a little bit of time, and I want to make sure your voices are part of this. So feel free to drop questions in the chat. So next up, just building on that, Carrie and Emily, what are you hearing from educators in terms of positive, intentional use of AI in classrooms?
I think one thing we're hearing is a lot of variation as we talk to educators. No surprise. And frankly, a lot of variation in how much support they feel like they're getting or not getting from their district. And in terms of guidance, policies, even the literacy piece. And I will just say briefly that our colleague Beck Tench has an amazing set of resources in development through CDT that are around trying to help students and teachers have better discussions about AI use and figure out what is in the ethical gray area, how do we and how do we make our way through it. So that's kind of another sweep. But I will just say one thing that really struck me last week. I was doing some educator interviews and I was hearing from educators about different ways that they're using AI in their own practice in ways that actually feel really values aligned to them. So less about their students' use. And this was really, we were really focusing on how they are actually using AI. And in some cases, in secret, because they're not sure if it's okay to be using AI or not. They've gotten sort of mixed guidance. But I interviewed a principal who was talking about using AI. He was talking about how he used AI to generate a list of it was like 20 different ideas of potential interventions for a student who was having a hard time. And what he said is, when you get a list like that, 15 of them will be things that he's already thought of.
Yep.
Four of them will be things, or three of them will be things that are actually just they're bad ideas. They're either bad ideas in general or they're bad ideas for that particular student. But if he can get one or two things on that list that he hasn't thought of that are ideas that he thinks actually might be worth trying, and they end up being the critical support, that is such an unlock and so worthwhile. And I loved that story in part because I think that it also shows the importance of his own professional wisdom and expertise and discernment in making sense of how he was going to actually use the list of recommendations and bringing that and showing up. And so feels like one of the things that's often happening is like as these tools are coming at educators like so fast and furious, feels like just another thing that we have to figure out. We don't always take the time to actually just remind everyone that you have so much professional wisdom and expertise and experience that is going to be absolutely crucial as you make sense of what feels right and what doesn't in your own classroom and what your learning goals are for your students and how these things fit in. And so I've been really appreciating that in the interviews with educators that we've been doing this summer.
So, so I'm just checking to see if there are any questions in chat. I don't see any questions, but I want to give folks another minute or two. Just as part of a wrap up, here, are there any final thoughts, either Carrie or Emily, that you'd want to share in this moment, before we either take a question or two or we wrap up?
I guess I'll build on what Emily shared about, the both the opportunities and the puzzles around Gen AI and really kind of underscore the power of turning to colleagues and having those conversations. We piloted educator community experience last week called AI Explorers Club. And I actually think that there's one person here on the screen who joined that. And it was so powerful to be in that space. And we felt it was powerful, and the feedback suggests it was for educators to be wrestling together with the many questions that come up as they themselves use AI or take us, or try to make sense of some of the uses of their students. So educator community is huge here, and we're going to be doing a lot more to try to support that.
Emily, any final thoughts?
No, thank you so much to everyone for joining us. I feel like we should dive into the water behind us. Thanks for trying. Thanks for the patience with our experiment on LinkedIn Live, which became a Zoom Live. We're so happy to have you all here. And if you have questions that come up as you move forward, we would love to hear them. For us, I think maybe it's worth saying that we create these resources and we view them as sort of living, breathing things that we will iterate as we learn more and as we hear more from teachers and from students about what's working and what isn't. So we'd love for you to try them and we'd love for you to evolve them and adapt them. And if you do, we're curious to hear what you learn as well.
Awesome. Thank you again to everyone who joined us. Quick reminder, our giveaway form closes in about 5 minutes. So if you are looking to be able to participate, go for it with that form. You can also learn more about the full course at in the chat. There's a link in the chat to learn more about the full course. So go ahead and check that out. And then we also, for all of you who joined us live, get that 30% off promo code. And you can also share that with your friends and colleagues. So feel free to do so. And yeah, thanks again and keep thriving.